It's a great honor for me to be here. And in fact, among so many wonderful friends, I met Jeff Sachs many years ago in Eastern Europe, and we met rather strongly disagreeing about how to privatize the world or whatever. We still disagree about a lot of things, but disagreements are really a pleasure of life, especially when they involve such friends as Jeff Sachs. Okay, so to paraphrase a minor 19th century economist, a specter is haunting the United States, the specter of inequality. The reality is, of course, very complicated. But as always, we hear a simple picture. And the picture in this part of the world, or maybe in this part of the country that we hear, is that we have an unprecedented growth of the last 40 years of inequality. Huge fortunes the fortunes are ever greater, unprecedented also in history, and concentrated in very few hands, about 1/10 of 1%, and so on. We also are told that the income and wealth of the middle and working classes has been stagnant or diminishing. I will mention some things about that, but that's part of the picture that we hear. The cause of all this, we hear, is the unbridled development of neoliberal capitalism and its capture of the state. So we have state-supported growth of corporate behemoths. We have essentially predatory, huge new institutions which derive monopolistic rents both from their unfair control of the market and from their control of the state. This also, there's another bête noire here, globalization, which means that we offshored most of our high-paying jobs, industrial jobs, and weakened the power of labor and essentially destroyed the unions. Moreover, we are told inequality is basically more inherited today than ever before, because not only does it pass through the laws of inheritance, but it also passes through lifetime transfers via expensive education, social connections, corrupting role of money in ever-increasing domains of social and political life. Socialism suddenly, in fact, reappeared as a word in American political discourse, which I think is very significant. We haven't heard, since McCarthy at least, we haven't really heard the word socialism in American politics. And we hear calls for a deep economic and social restructuring, radical redistribution, and something that I don't want to explain now, but I just mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about some kind of democratization of our economic life, not just political life. Okay, so what are we to think about it, really? Okay? I think the rise of inequality between those at the top and the rest of the society in the economically advanced countries in the world, especially as compared to what was happening after World War II, is an indisputed fact. I mean, we can't deny that that's going on, okay? But the causes and consequences, as always, is not as simple. And what's more important, its moral significance, and I agree with Jeff that morality is a huge part of both politics and economics. And moral and institutional significance of this is much more complex than is usually presented. And unless we understand something more about it, I think fighting inequality can degenerate into something actually quite harmful. So first, I want to put this growth and inequality in a little bit of a perspective of a few other developments that have been taking place alongside the growth of inequality in the last 40 years. First of all, there has been a very serious lessering of inequality domestically in terms of improved position of disfavored minorities. Women are not a minority, but we refer to them as such. Women, disfavored groups, let's say, women, ethnic minorities. I don't want to say that we are anywhere near where we should be, but there's no question that there has been a big progress. And this may not have been completely unrelated to some of the inequality. For example, the weakening of the unions. Unions were a great defender of white male workers' aristocracy. And the opening of the workplace to minorities and women, I think, is not entirely unrelated, though, of course, the demise of the union is not anything enough to explain what was going on. Now, second, and that is, in this context, the most important, globalization, which did lower the wage growth of, in the United States and the relative position of the working people as compared to their employers, produced an unparalleled growth of equality on the global scale. This is a little bit of an alternative view to the one that Jeff had just presented about the most recent development and the meaning of globalization. But there is indeed, as I say, unprecedented since the 18th century. Unprecedented growth of human equality, and millions, perhaps billions of people have been brought out of hunger, extreme poverty, complete destitution, and this is not unconnected to the disappearance of extremely high wages in a protectionist American workplace. In very peculiar period after the war, where the United States was economically dominant in the world and could dictate all terms. So I, in fact, want to say, and here again I sort of, with pleasure, disagree with my friend, globalization is, in fact, the high point of American global leadership. In fact, the only other parallel that I can conceive is the Marshall Plan, where the United States also taxed itself in a significant way in order to help its old enemies and imperialist allies, even though it was quite hostile to the imperialist order that Britain had perpetrated. So, like the old Marshall Plan, the globalization essentially helped our rivals and people who are the most potentially the greatest threat to our hegemony. In fact, it helped them to achieve an unprecedented level of development. And the jury is, of course, still out whether the beneficiaries of globalization, like the beneficiaries of the Marshall Plan, will successfully democratize. I mean, China is nowhere near where sort of people interested in freedom would like it to be. But the jury is in that the Chinese people and a lot of other people in the world, but maybe in particular the Chinese people, live not only in much greater material comfort, but with much greater dignity, and their freedom is incomparably greater than during the days of Mao Zedong and so on. And that has something to do with this phenomenon of globalization. And of course, globalization also contributed to the well-being of the American consumers. And inequality in the US did increase as a result, but let's not fool ourselves. The American workers are still in a very privileged position. They live in the richest country in the world, and their incomes have grown, not diminished, over the last 40 years. In fact, since 1980, wages have grown about 17%. Now, that's not maybe what we expected them to grow, and people, there is a certain malaise in the air. People are a little worried about whether their children, whether they will live as well as their parents, and whether parents are worried whether their children are going to make it. But I think American working classes are not doing that bad. So what I want to say is that globalization is actually only one of the causes of recent increase in domestic inequality. The other, more fundamental cause is the radical structure in the economic order, a radical change in the structure of economic order. And I'm talking also about the technological revolution that transformed the frontier of economic development. A single computer does what hundreds of clerical jobs people used to do. Digitalization completely revolutionized finance, insurance, all kinds of other things, education, cultural products, movies, books are produced and delivered in ways that have been unimaginable 50 years ago. And in a few years, probably the car is going to look in ways that would be completely unimaginable to somebody who went to deep sleep just a few years ago. Okay, so there is this huge technique. Now, how does this impact the problem of inequality? Now, the new technology did not weaken the working people by eliminating the overall number of jobs. Though perhaps AI may do something like that, and sort of Luddite theory in the future may be a little, looks now that it's maybe a little less implausible. But so far, it is not the case. More people are working today in the United States than ever before. Unemployment is at a low point in post-war history, so it's not automation and elimination of jobs that impoverished the American people, the working people in America. The relevant consequence of the new technology is that fewer and fewer people create greater and greater part of the national wealth. Okay? And this is very important. All these new people whom people want to style as robber barons, the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, whatever, as well as the whole army of technologically savvy entrepreneurs, did not make their fortunes by getting state monopolies, even though they're often accused of that. They are not underpaying the people who work for them, and they didn't steal from anybody. In fact, most of their goods are delivered to actual consumers for free. Not most, but many. Okay. These people actually started with no or very little human capital, and within an incredibly short period of time created the most dynamic part of the world's richest economy. So something new is going on here. And what is new is that while technological progress was always decisive on the frontiers of economic development, previously this progress considered largely in making relatively unskilled industrial labor more productive. And suddenly what happened in the 21st century is that innovations can often result in very valuable products being brought to consumer in next to no time with very little need for unskilled labor along the way. And so what changed is not the need for labor in producing industrial goods and traditional services that are still consumed by most of the population. Those jobs have been in part moved outside of the United States, but of course not entirely. What changed is that the frontiers have moved beyond the employment of any but the most highly sophisticated and often unique form of human labor. And it is here that the new wealth is produced and the rates of return are enormous. That's where these fortunes come from, and where that's one of the important causes of the new inequality. Now, I want to say that this one rarely observed effect of this is the change in the role of education. You see, mass education has long been seen as the main hope of improving the skills and life standard of the people, and thus as a driver of social mobility and decreasing inequality. Now, the levels of skill required on the frontiers in today's economy may simply have become so high as to be beyond anything that mass education system can deliver. Education, of course, is still going to be very important in training people for traditional jobs and also to nurture the new entrepreneurial elite, but that may be much more bifurcated than it has ever been in the, well, that he has been in the past 50, 60 years. Education had been very bifurcated until about World War II. Now, education may also reacquire its traditional role as something valuable in itself and enhancing good quality of life, as opposed to job training simply. But it is unlikely that today's or tomorrow's inequality is due to working people's limited access to education or the low quality of education that they are getting. More likely, our expectations with respect to the role of education as a great equalizer needs themselves to be seriously modified. That is not the way in which we are going to successfully fight inequality. So, on the other hand, even if generated by legitimate economic activity that in the end improves the well-being of everyone, the new economic inequality of results may produce all kinds of economic, social, and political dislocation, which can seriously threaten both political stability and economic prosperity. So we do need to do something about it. No matter how questionable, calls to soak the rich have been known to cause problems in the past. Some revolutions in fact, happened in this way. And today's populist and authoritarian political developments may present a similar threat and be fed by the rising inequality. And it may be foolish, given our experiences of the last 10 years, to put too much faith in the old "it couldn't happen here" theory. So how are we supposed to react to the challenges of inequality? So I want to say, to begin with, that the first thing, in the context of, oops, did I get all of this? Okay, I'm sorry. In the context of today's politics, the main danger is to succumb to the collectivist perspective on the link between inequality and capitalism, and to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. Soak the rich, how they talk. We hear all kinds of new antitrust theories that I think lack serious economic justification, but we are going back to the old sort of Brandeisian idea of antitrust, which is essentially the enemy of bigness. Any big company is bad. We have to break down all these Amazons and Facebooks and everything. and the defense of the consumer, the interest of the consumer, is no longer the important consideration. There are predatory practices, even though there's no real market power, and so on. So I think this is another potential threat that we need to avoid. It's again, those calls are fed by inequality and the inveighing against the billionaires and the rich, but that's a dangerous development. There is also the stakeholder corporate governance we sort of have taken over from Europe, the idea that corporations don't serve the interests of shareholders, they should serve the interests of the workers, society, the state, and the management is supposed to balance all these interests, and the difference between politics and economics and management disappears, and that's sort of what I meant by the idea of democratization of economic life, which is a very dangerous idea. Politics are supposed to be democratic, but there is really, economics is governed by private property, it's naturally hierarchical. So what should we do? So I think liberal politicians should develop a two-pronged strategy dealing with the challenge of inequality. First, we should recognize that some forms of inequality are due to injustice, and they're not due to particularly economic factors. The most important of these in the United States, the heritage of slavery, the persistence of racism, sexism, xenophobia, have little to do with economic order and are due to various social and political factors deeply rooted in the past. And undoing, it may be costly to reduce inequality due to this, but it may be possible without, at the same time, monkeying up too much the economic situation. And even if the protests against inequality are often driven by resentment or difficult or some ideological commitments, it may make sense to adopt other redistributive policies that not only buy political peace, but do more than that. They potentially offer an opportunity to creatively transform the social and cultural institutions of American life. Now, I want to very quickly, because I don't want to take time, I want to very quickly just list a couple of these things that look to me like redistributive policies that would do good and not do, at least do this kind of harm that I'm talking about. I mean, basically, this creative transformation of social cultural institution is redefining the relation between work and leisure, giving new meaning to the concept of citizenship, and providing people with some material stake in the maintenance of the economic and political order. So the first policy that I think we should more seriously consider that we are doing, there are some interesting conversations. We should pay the descendants of American slaves the present value of labor that was forcibly taken away from them. This is, first of all, you know, the injustice of slavery and its lingering effects are indisputable, so it's very difficult to contest. It also, the restitution resonates well with the basic values of American liberal capitalist order. It protects property rights. It restitutes stolen wages, essentially. It is in line with inheritance laws, and you know, people say, oh, this was 150 years ago, it's too damn. Prescription, legally, there is no claim, it's true, it's too long. But you know, I don't think it's a real obstacle. Nobody seriously objects to the fact that 75 years after the Holocaust, we support restitution of stolen Jewish property stolen by the Nazis, even though it is also past prescription period, and is often restituted to people who weren't even born at the time that the owners were killed. So it seems to me that it should be much easier to legitimize, and it's a policy that has it's costly, but it has no lasting negative economic effects. I'm going to mention a couple of other ones. Of course, every society believes in providing some minimum material resources to protect dignity and provide an opportunity to flourish. But of course, it's very difficult to decide what this minimum means. And some people say, you know, that it really makes people lazy or whatever, and other people will never be satisfied with anything short of total economic equality. So designing these policies of providing some kind of basis for everybody, a material basis in a good society is a complicated matter. But there are some actually attractive options that again don't have those negative many of those negative economic effects. Ned Phelps, of course, long advocated subsidies for lower segment of market wages. This isn't an easy thing to do, but he did argue that actually it can be done without having serious distortions of incentives, and in fact is in the spirit of the capitalist system because it will make work more creative again. There is another, many people, maybe let me take it back for a second. Many people advocate some form of minimum income. Now, minimum income has obviously economically distortionary effects, has some problems, especially when the wages are low, distorts incentive to work and so on. But there was this very interesting proposal maybe a couple decades ago already by Bruce Ackerman and Ann Alstott to make sure to actually provide people with a one-time capital endowment. They proposed, I think, that every person on graduation from high school gets a bank account with, I think they said $80,000, but that was a long time ago. It would be more today, so let's say $150,000. And at a one-time supplement, which not only does not discourage you from working, you could be used to start a business, to improve education, to make a down payment on the house. It gives people a greater sense of security, but it also gives them a stake in the maintenance of and success of the prosperity of the economic and political orders. People they become stakeholders. That's why Ackerman and Alstott called it the stakeholder society. The last thing I want to mention is that if it is true that AI creates pressure on jobs because it will eliminate a lot of jobs, then there are other redistributive policies that are quite attractive. You know, one of the greatest things that happened during the Great Depression is the 5-day work week. You know, I still remember, not because I'm so old, but because I was brought up in the communist world. I remember my parents working on Saturday, okay? Shorting labor, making the labor week shorter would be a wonderful relief to a lot of people. It could protect employment. You would work less, but there will be fewer people who don't have work. And it would offer an opportunity seriously to rethink the concept of leisure as more than just a rest from work, along the lines perhaps of bringing together again the culture and economics along the line that Ned so beautifully described in his book on human flourishing. So greater educational opportunities, subsidized, of course heavily subsidized, might restore the role of education as more than job training. You know, it's sort of Aristotle said, you know, knowledge is for its own sake as opposed to for the sake of other things, is what free human beings are defined by. You know, there could be various subsidies of cultural institutions that could contribute to good life and so on. So this is all I have to say, but in one sentence, one longer sentence, but one sentence I'll try. Inequality is real. It has to be properly understood and counteracted, but in ways that don't kill the goose, that golden egg. It's not capitalism. Capitalism produces inequality, but not illegitimately so. And counteracting them may be helpful and from a cultural, social point of view actually well justified, both for preserving the wealth and growth of our societies, but also for making life richer and more fulfilling.